Okay, so hi everybody. Welcome to IHA's webinar for this month. This one is about Advanced Directives, useful or useless. We're gonna like people are coming in, but I think we'll just get started because it's 1 past the hour. So we're so glad you're here, and we want to welcome Kathy Kastner, our speaker. Kathy is the CEO of bestendings.com, and she's an author, speaker, producer, and patient educator, specializing in end-of-life issues surrounding care and support. So we're really excited to have you, Kathy, and I'm going to just give some quick housekeeping for people, and then we will get started. So everyone, this session will be recorded, and the recording and slides will be available on the Health Literacy Solutions Center webinar page, and we'll put the link in the chat. If there's any technical issues, you can email direct to support@healthliteracysolutions.org, and our team will help you. You'll notice that this is a new platform. This is not the Zoom platform we usually use. This is called Ring Central, and it has some cool features. So it might look a little different, but bear with us. It still has the same chat and Q&A. If you've asked for CE credits, you will get an evaluation email to you, and once you fill it out and submit it back, then we will send you your CE credits. Kathy will be answering questions at the end. And so please use the Q&A box if you could for questions for Kathy. And if but feel free to use the chat box to comment or introduce or whatever, like that will be for everyone. But if you have a question that Kathy will answer at the end, then please use the Q&A box. So I think that is all the housekeeping. But I just want to say that I'm really excited to have Kathy here. If we have to to her today. So I'm going to pass it off to her, but just in case you can't see the caption here on the comic, it says, "Mother wouldn't want us to feel sad. She'd want us to feel guilty." So with that, Kathy, I will.
Thank you, Julie, although I did not hear your last remark. Thank you for reading out the caption, but I lost your audio. I don't know if anyone else. Now, I take it you can hear me now? Yeah. So, well, hello, everybody. Thank you for I'm hoping you can hear me because I've unmuted myself. Okay, so take two. Here I am, Kathy Kastner, talking about my favorite topic, dying and death. I so relish being here. IHA is one of my favorite places to be amongst the three focus areas I have as a patient, which are health literacy, shared decision-making, and meaningful end-of-life conversations. And don't they all go together? In fact, both of the other focuses should all be here, right? The shared decision-making folks, the Advance Directive folks, but here you all are. So the reason I have chosen this cartoon is to set the tone, because while it is a deadly topic, forgive the pun, I try to inject as much humor as I can. So I'm hoping it is not offensive to anybody. Okay, the objectives, which I hope I really will be able to accomplish. I have put another of my favorite cartoons, which maybe you have seen. Although I don't know, I see dogs now that actually do seem to understand what's going on. So maybe I have to change that slide. So because this is health literacy, it's important for me to address language that can confound and confuse, even simple single syllable words. So we're going to start with a poll to see where you're all at. And the poll will be posted in a moment, but apparently on this platform, it takes 30 or 45 seconds to actually get the poll started. So until then, I'm going to give you an example of where I have incorporated the health literacy and shared decision-making topics. I've created something called 10-Second Med School, which is a YouTube series, and it is specifically about medication administration confusion. So one of the things, for example, is an 80-year-old guy who's been prescribed medicine that says, take when you wake up. Well, damned if he doesn't nod off all day long, and every time he nods off and wakes up, he takes another pill. Oops. So I think that the poll is not necessarily working. I'm wondering if you can possibly put your answers into the chat. And there are two parts to this new platform, one that you're seeing, and then another part that I'm not part of, which is called the back end. And I think you may be seeing that. However, hopefully you will be able to answer the poll. But if not, know that I would like to understand better where my audience is.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to mention that there is some sort of technical difficulty going on and the poll is not available for the user, so we'll have to skip that part.
Okay. Alrighty. I don't know if all of you heard that, but we're moving on. We will never know how all of you feel about yes, no, or advanced directive. So I'm just going to assume that you know, perhaps you know something, but you're still interested. So, you know, advanced directive itself is quite a new word for the great mass of public out there. Perhaps you will all know it was called a living will, and when you read what it's supposed to be, it just sounds so easy. However, it's not that easy, because in these years that I posted here, each of these folks, three of whom were quite young, the first three who were quite young, were ostensibly brain dead, but their heart was still beating, and therefore the families for all of these three, actually all of them, refused to let them go. So after, I think it was after Terry Chavo, perhaps Karen Ann Quillinan as well, that it was determined that something more complex and comprehensive than just the living will, which concentrated on CPR and heroic measures, if anyone knew what that meant. So it was determined by the powers that be that the word advanced directive should replace living wills. And maybe many of you know this, but from my own work with regular people, nobody knows what the hell it is. And not only that, but when it was changed from living will to advanced directives, it was determined that maybe that's not quite right. So there are a number of different things that pretty much mean the same thing. And the POLST is a newer one, and so is the MOLST, M-O-L-S-T. But really, they all ask you, in a way, the same questions, which, in my opinion, does nobody any good if you do not have context, if you don't understand the trajectories, what the sequelae is. And if you want your own state, because to make it even more complicated, each state has its own advanced directive and requirements. So here is the website to get that, which I've also listed at the end with all of the resources that I have. You know, as one is going through these decisions, even DNR is problematic in that many people understand it as do not treat. Now, I know do not treat would be DNT, but that does not matter. In our brains, somehow we've removed the word revive to treat. And that, as you can imagine, also sets up an incorrect expectation. There's also DNR comfort care, which is an actual designation, but that can be refusing too, but confusing, not refusing, but confusing. Intubation, what does that look like? What does that mean? Does that mean tubes in the nose? Does that mean tubes down the throat? CPR, which many people certainly do understand, but there are many different types of CPR. You know, there's bystander CPR. There's the one you learned if you went to babysitting school. There's the one in the hospital. If you've seen it on TV, you've seen, you know, paddle on the chest, and then the person leaps up off the gurney. Well, that's not correct at all. Mechanical breathing also has a range of interpretations. Feeding tubes, there are 2 or 3 different kinds of feeding tubes. Some are for short term, some are for longer term, like my sister had with ALS. Dialysis, does one keep on doing dialysis? Not to mention the donations, organ donation, which depends on the state of your organs. Tissue donation, it's the same as with eye, and whole body donation is much more complicated than one might hope, in that you have to contact universities and see if they're accepting bodies and see if the body is in the right shape for donation. You think all these things would be relatively simple. Then there are other words that can confound. Advanced directives is but one. Nothing more that we can do is just a terrible thing to say to anybody, because in palliative care, which is another confusing word, there's many things that can be done. Doing everything. What does that actually mean? And then there are words that just make me cringe. Withhold, which sounds like you're not going to get something that you should get. Withdraw, which sounds like you're getting something taken away that you should have. Futile measures. What is futile measures? What is heroic measures? Hope is another one that has a whole spectrum of meaning. You know, so for a friend of mine who found true love at age 70, only to find that her husband was diagnosed with a terminal condition and had a month to live, and their form of hope was a bowl of marbles. One empty bowl, one bowl of marbles. They hoped to place more marbles in the empty bowl than not. Values is just too abstract a word, but it certainly is one of the ones that are being pushed forward to try and do the best for us at the end of life. The same with the word beliefs and goals of care. I understand the intention, but a goal for many of us relates to sports. It relates to, you know, I want to finish a book this year. That's my goal. So that goals of care is to, we just don't understand it the way they would like us to understand it. I just learned another word that can confound, which is trial. You know, we're going to trial a feeding tube. Well, what does that mean? I've watched trials on TV. Are there trials that these things are going to involve tests? So the assumption on the part of all well-meaning healthcare professionals is that we understand the way they want us to understand it. And then there's the critical part. If you can't speak, who's going to do it on your behalf? Look at all the names that it comes under. And what none of these names say is, make sure your person knows they're the person. Make sure your person knows what you want in advance, because then you can, if there's an argument, you can use the opportunity to explain what it is you want and why. So there's an example of this. There's a surgeon in California, Rebecca Sudore, who's a palliative care, sorry, she's not a surgeon, she's a palliative care doctor. And she found that her grandfather was failing. And none of his doctors had deigned to speak to him about what his wishes were. So she asked him, while his wife was there, her grandmother, "Grandpa, if you collapsed now, what would you want done?" Grandfather said, "I'm happy. I've had a good life. Just let me go. I'm peaceful with this." She turned to her grandmother and said, "Grandma, what would happen if Grandpa collapsed right now?" And Grandma said, "I would do everything." She turned to her grandfather and said, "Grandpa, do you think Grandma heard anything that you said?" And her grandfather, the husband of the grandmother, said, "She's the one who's going to have to live with her decisions. I'm going to let her decide." So this is a completely different attitude than proposing a healthcare proxy, healthcare agent, making sure they know what you want, trying to honor what you want, versus saying, "I understand that my people are going to be left behind. I have to allow them to deal with their own needs for my dying." And I'm thinking that's not a bad way to go. Now, having said all this, I have been saying since the beginning of my diatribes on this, advanced care planning is not doing what you think it's going to do for so many reasons. And finally, just last year, research has come to prove my point, that it does not do what it's supposed to be thinking of doing. And there's a reason for that. And then there's more research here that talks about doing a more pragmatic approach, that as crises happen, that is when you should be given, which you're often not just the immediate crises, but what are your expectations in any intervention? Because often we think, and this is not just for end of life, but we think, go in for the, like my husband is going to be going in for neck surgery. For some reason, he also thought it might help something else. So there are people that think that doing one intervention is going to help their diabetes. So there are other conditions, and that is not the case. So that to be understanding what decisions may be coming up with a particular disease trajectory. And there are trajectories out there that show you how, things like cancer and congestive heart failure and diabetes, there's a slow progression or even dementia, where there are other conditions where it's quite quick, or what the milestones, better, or they know better what the milestones are going to be, and therefore can alert you to the decisions that may be ahead. There's also another study that I have just come across that talks about readiness, that the offering even of a palliative care consult. And I think there's still much misunderstanding about palliative care. I think palliative care for many is still understood as a euphemism for you're going to die and there's nothing more that we can do for it. But I think that is shifting to understand that that palliative care addresses your not just your physical, but your emotional and your spiritual and your social needs. so that it adds a level of comfort without having to focus on what you're hoping for in a cure. But sometimes that gets misunderstood. So the most recent research talks about language again. If you're introducing end of life care and describing it as such, many people just do not want to go there yet. They're just not ready. Maybe they'll never be ready. So perhaps a reframing of palliative care to, to what I wanted to, what I have decided. But before I tell you what I've decided, here are some really important tools, which again, I've listed in the last slide, which has all of these resources. This best case, worst case, which has lots of evidence behind it, was created by a palliative care doctor and a surgeon. Very unusual for surgeons to think about beyond the surgery. But what this does, there's several things. One of it is to let not just you, but your people understand what is going to happen next, and next in a specific situation. In this case, it's high-risk surgery. But this tool, best case, worst case, can be used for anything. And it, as this picture says, it helps tell a story of what it may look like if you, decide for comfort care that you won't have to go to, you may not have to go to rehab. You may not be in recovery after the surgery. You can go home and get your, etc. So the other benefit of this simple paper-based tool is that you can show it to other people, because we don't make these decisions in a vacuum. We are always, except in the case of my father, who did make decisions in a vacuum and in a way robbed us of being able to encourage him to stay alive. He didn't commit suicide, but he did not do he had preventative options available to him, and he just didn't want to take any of them. So if perhaps he had had a literal line drawing like this to show us, rest of the family, why he had made his choices, we would better be able to understand what his worries were, what his hopes were, what his expectations were. And those are the questions I think should be posed instead of many of the Advanced Directives forms. To just be asking, what are you worried about? What are you hoping for? What are your expectations here? There's the serious illness conversation guide, which is designed actually really to help your primary care physician set up a conversation and go through it with you to the best of their ability. And again, this link is in the final slide. So I was involved in a North America-wide study funded by PCORI, which many of you know, that assessed whether it was best for primary care physicians to have this serious illness conversation one-on-one with patients, or whether it was better to be a team-based situation, calling upon a social worker or a nurse. And it turned out there was no difference. But what critical component there was in this study was training the physicians on this conversation guide, because for many it is very uncomfortable, especially for, it turns out, for primary care physicians who have often developed the most fulsome relationship with us. And the notion of introducing a serious illness conversation, which is a euphemism really for end of life as well, can erode that trust. Why are you talking about death? Why are you talking about dying? I'm not dying. I'm not ready to do that. Be that as it may, helping to train physicians was a big, huge step in allowing the conversations, because it's not just one conversation. Often we have to think about this. And one of the questions that just got right up my nose was, what abilities would you not want to live without? Which is a cumbersome question anyhow, but what abilities would you not want to live without? And, the patients were filling it in predictably. If I can't go to the bathroom by myself, if I can't eat by myself, were the obvious abilities. But in my opinion, as a patient, it set up the expectation that once you've told your primary care, your trusted advisor, that you would not want to live without those abilities, and yet there you are in a situation where you can't go to the bathroom by yourself. What can that PCP do for you? Nothing. So the words about what matters are also a bit obscure, because what matters may not be feasible. What matters may be just medically not feasible. But I think any of these tools are useful because there's so much to absorb. There's so much to think about. Vital Talk is another fabulous one where there are a number of videos, and this one is a fairly recent addition. And because one of the things that I do is facilitate medical students of all stripes, so dentists and OTs and PTs, I facilitate discussions about end-of-life conversations at University of Toronto. And we use case studies, and one of them was a woman in the hospital who said to her, not her doctor, but whoever was nearest to her, I'm afraid I'm dying. And we ask these students, what would you do? And I suggest pausing. I suggest that silence, and you probably know this because of the work that you do, but that to be able to create, as they say, space for someone's emotions and feelings, which can be a really uncomfortable thing for anybody, including doctors. So, and I know that you deal with the doctor-patient communication gap, but I don't doubt this conversation is awkward for anybody. So that's why I'm glad you're all here. And this is what Rebecca Sudore, the one who asked her grandfather what he would want and got the answer from her grandmother. There are stories that she has put together and a questionnaire that she has put together. And again, each of these things has their use, if only to help one move the mind from, I can't bear to talk about this, to, okay, maybe there are certain things that I can consider that aren't as hard to talk about, whatever it is. Pain management. Let's talk about pain management. So being able to call upon things, and then this is my own website, because I got into this crazy subject when I fell upon a tweet chat with hospice and palliative care professionals from all stripes. And they said, if only people talked about end of life, it would make things so much easier. And as you can tell, I'm a talker. So I posted, well, I don't know what to talk about. And they provided me with research, great literature, forums, and I came to see that we need a bunch of different kinds of prompts. So I decided to start my planning tool by giving people quotes that they may relate to better than anybody else. And so the feedback I've gotten on both this component and one of the other questionnaires is, I would want this procedure if within a certain amount of time frame I got back to normal. so that you can think about how long a recovery period that's going to be 2 years. Well, some people will say, fine, great, I'm into it. I'm figuring I'm going to improve over that 2 years. Others may say, I've been living with this for just so long, I don't want to contemplate another procedure in the hospital. I get weakened in the hospital, etc. So there's much more to think about than just CPR and heroic measures. And then there's a sort of a prompt list to let people consider things that are quality of life, but that rarely get talked about. I mean, constipation and dry mouth. These are such critical things for people, and yet we do not consider them to say, make sure, or like in my case, my neck, I get a chilly neck all the time. I'm telling everybody, make sure I've got a comfy scarf to wear. So these are all kinds of things to consider. So I took this into account when I started my journey into how can we present ourselves as individuals? How can we try to ensure we bring our humanity into this conversation? And so what I did was bring a whiteboard to conferences and ask, so the conferences that I go to, again, palliative care, public health, shared decision-making, health literacy, I asked the participants to fill in this blank. And this is a podcast that I did on it, which if you want to hear it, I can send you a link, but basically you're hearing it right now. So this is not a bucket list. This is not an aspirational thing. This is something that requires people to go away in their brains and think about what brings a small joy, a small pleasure, a small comfort. And it turns out it's not necessarily that easy to identify something like that. So I've been encouraging people when they've had a good day to pay attention to what made that day good and try and incorporate a bit of that into every day. And then it leads to this. So, for me, a good day, all of the things for a good day includes hugs, laughter, exercise, patting a dog, fresh air, and tequila. So if I can have some of those, some of everyone, patting dogs, did I already say that? I probably did. Then I know that I'm on my way to having a good day, and that I can identify these things for my people. Because in having, and just look at those smiling faces. I don't know if you know any of these folks. Stan Hudson, who's now an IHA honcho. There is Sabrina Kurtz-Rossi and Michael Wolf and several other people from the HARC or IHA conferences. And look at those smiles. Because the thing is, if you approach this from what people do want in their lives, I mean, you can also do, of course, advanced directives and all whatever else. But if you can identify what people do want in their lives, it's a benefit for a number of reasons. First of all, get this into your GP's, your PCP's chart, patient chart, so that everyone can see you as a human, for the things that bring you joy. But it also helps the people around you. Often we don't know what to do when someone's dying, because dying can be a long, tedious process. But if you know, like my people know, that I want a dog, well, they can try and get me a therapy dog. I held a video chat in my living room with people from several different backgrounds. We had a Mexican Catholic, a good old-fashioned WASP, a Buddhist, Muslim, and an atheist. That would be me. And one of them said, you know, I've spoken about this with my mother. She said, I have restless legs. So if I am out of it, please massage my legs. And my friend that said this said, I've got something to do now. I can do something that is going to make my mom feel better and that makes me feel useful. So this idea of capturing what people do want can be a game changer. Now, wait, before we go there, I did a theme analysis, which is published. And because I got 200 people to fill in these boards from all around the world, because it was attended by conference people from all around the world. And there were enough women and men saying, I want to look beautiful. I want to look handsome. I want my hair to be done. I want my eyes made up. I want nail polish on. That showed me the impact of something that certainly all women know, perhaps many men know too, that how we look affects how we feel. So why not take that into account? It's not a medical thing, but it certainly is something that can bring joy, relief, usefulness to both sides. But the theme that came out on top was feeling purposeful. Reading, hiking, being creative, drawing, learning, painting. Now, this makes perfect sense to me. How many people have we all seen who have retired, do not feel purposeful or productive, and wither? So there are many ways for people to feel involved and productive, but some of them may not literally be fulfillable. Many people talked about being in nature. You know, I talk about getting fresh air and going for a walk. But what happens if you can't literally do that? Well, I think that technology can provide solutions for that. For us nature lovers, record bird sounds, and sounds of trees, bring in plants, have a video of whatever. And for being productive and purposeful, there are just so many small things that can be done, even with a compromised body. And I think those things, feeling useful and productive, should not be ignored in the enormity and the energy put forward to taking care of someone. So one of the other things that drove this home was my sister, who recently died of ALS, which is, just a horrible disease. She had filled in a DNR. And yet when one of her nurses came to give her relief from breathlessness, she overdosed my sister. Now, instead of taking note of the DNR, which it turned out did not cover giving too much medication, she called in a doctor who gave my sister the same drug that given for accidental overdoses in a well person, Narcan, Loxone. And my poor sister, who, while she didn't have a DNR, definitely just wanted to go. And there she was, drugged awake, and it was horrible for everyone. So a DNR does not necessarily mean you're going to get your wishes done. In fact, none of this stuff makes sure that you're going to get your advanced care wishes done. So that what I suggest to everybody is to tell everyone who may be interested, involved, concerned, the cousin in so say California, but many of you are in California, the cousin in Canada who drops in and says, I knew your mom best. We were the closest. And so that avoids or helps avoid what often happens at the end, that people disagree. No, mother wouldn't have wanted that. Yes, mother would have wanted that. So, and in the case of my sister, it was interesting, particularly interesting for me, because medical aid in dying is legal in Canada. And if I were diagnosed with ALS, which immediately fits the criteria, man, I'd be signing up like that. Not my sister. So we watched that devastating decline. And until about the last month, she was able to text. And she was a furious texter. She texted so furiously that she wrote an entire article, a funny article on her brain and body negotiating, which was then published in Neurology Today, which was a real coup for her to get, as you know, I'm not a healthcare professional, and for her to get something published, which may help doctors better understand what ALS patients are going through, and certainly may help other ALS patients to speak to another, to hear from another person in that situation. So I believe I have come to the takeaway that completing an advanced directive just guarantees nothing, especially since who knows where it is? Who knows where it is? You can lock it in your safety deposit box, give it to your lawyer, put it in a drawer, a safety drawer. But when time comes that you want to actually know, or you want the doctor to know, where is it? And that's the second thing. Who knows where if it's going to be around in the time of decision, and it still opens things up for discussions. It's like, yes, that's what she said when she, had all her wits about her when she was able to, but perhaps that's not what she wants now. It requires really using more than one tool, more than one conversation, allowing for silences, allowing for explanation of why you don't want to have that done. And perhaps it also involves listening to a wife, a grandmother, or a kid saying, oh, please don't do that. Like, for instance, I was really brought up by a housekeeper who was a nanny, and because my mom was often ill, and she is 91 now, and she said to me, I'm done. I've had it. I'm ready to go. And I said to her, but Anna, I will miss you so much. And she said, that's your problem. And it is a problem for we who are left behind. So one of the things that this whole journey and process has enabled me to do is ask my grown-up kids what they need. We're not talking about an advanced directive now, but what are you going to need when I'm gone? Are you going to need a gravestone, because I want to be cremated, but are you going to need a tombstone, a headstone? Are you going to need a plot of land? What are you going to need to help you grieve? And their first answer, bless their little hearts, was, Mom, you tell us and we will follow it respectfully. And I said, that's great, but the thing is, I will be dead. So you have to think about what you need to carry on. And it may not be an immediate answer in your brain, but think about that. And yeah, they came up with, they're going to get a little bit of my ashes turned into a little urn that they can wear on a necklace when they want to wear it, which I just thought was a lovely thing. At the beginning of the conversation, they'd said, well, like, what music do you want to play? And I reverted to a line I heard from a oncology doctor whose children asked him the same thing. And his answer was, surprise me. So that is my thought. It is, in a way, as important to involve the people around you as it is to determine things on your own. And let's see, what is the next slide? Oh yeah, for those who are interested in medical aid in dying, which I didn't touch on, but I will tell you that in Canada, I volunteered to be a witness for the paperwork request that is required to kick off a request for medical aid in dying. The organization that organizes this has put together a group of volunteer witnesses in case you do not want anyone in your family to know about it, or you don't have anyone to rely on to fill in the form that says, I know I want to die, I'm not being coerced. And I signed up for this because I wanted to see who was asking for aid. Are they being coerced? Are they crazy in the head? Are they? And to a person, and I've done about 50 of them so far, to a man or to a person, the relief in knowing that they have control, that their suffering is going to end, that their people won't have to watch them deteriorate. No coercion at all. So I was relieved to that. But it's a tricky topic. So if you want to know what the deal is with your state, that is it. And then I'm thinking that maybe these resources can be shared, or I can, if you want, I can send out a link, because I know this is very small typing. And finally, I get to humble brag. Yeah, because since I have, nothing related to health education, I do not even have a university degree. This is the closest I'm going to be to being a healthcare professional for my late mother's purposes. And it has just been the most stimulating thing I could possibly do to delve into this tricky but necessary topic. So I'm not sure if you have questions. If not, I can go on and tell you, recount more stories of what I have collected over the years of craziness. But I'm going to leave it to Julie to see if there are questions and to get them out there. So thank you for listening to this a very long and sometimes upsetting conversation. But here I am, and here you are.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was great. I always love hearing you speak about this, like I said. So we do have a couple questions, and then if you get through those and want to tell us more stories, that would be great. I want to remind everyone, since Kathy has shared so many great links with us, that you will get the slides. So don't worry about copying things down. You'll get the slides. They'll be on the website at the Solution Center. Okay, so Kathy, two questions. One is, wait a second, here it is. What recommendations do you have about having conversations with people whose cultural relationship to death, oh, here it is, and dying may be different than our own? And you talked about, so we're talking with a multicultural group, but how would you address this?
I would have to learn, and you can, learn what the Google what their traditions are, because to this point, and I think it's a great one, I understand there's still many cultures that feel you should not tell the person they're dying. I don't know what you do with that, but you got to work within, possibly work within that. So that is what I would suggest. Go straight to their own cultures. Hoping that answers that.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, so this is another one. This is from Janelle Lamont. And actually, I have a quick story that illustrates this. So she says, so your wishes are contextual. There's loss of certain functions might be unacceptable before you become ill, but they change later. And so what are your suggestions to keep advanced directives specific and updated? And just a quick story, my father, who had Parkinson's, he was diagnosed very early on. He was actually my age, and it went a long time. He was almost 80 when he died, but his at the very beginning, he said, you know, if I lose all of these functions, I want to go. Just he joined the Hemlock Society. He was very into, you know, just letting himself go if he was going to be any burden on my mom. We asked him a few years later when things had progressed about to that point where he was losing functions. And we said, well, what do you think about this whole Hemlock Society thing? And he said, well, I've lost my enthusiasm for that idea. So things change. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, that is the thing. And suggestions to keep the advanced directives is specific and current. Whenever there's a change in health status, it's a good idea to do that and to revisit it, exactly as you said. Your dad said, okay, Dad, we better then revisit. If you can't speak for yourself and I'm the one speaking for you, let's get that changed. That's the best I can say, but I think those changes happen throughout that journey and often change from morning until night, depending on how awful you're feeling or not. It's tricky. This dying business is tricky. So I think those are both great questions.
Yeah. It sounds like just a lot of talking with the family is the key.
Well, the first iteration of my Best Endings website said, think, talk, learn, plan, repeat. Oh, share. Think, talk, learn, plan, share, and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, I had this conversation with my father-in-law at age 90, who was so happy that someone started the car. And one of his sons is a paramedic, and you know, he didn't do that, but he was very happy to talk about it, whereas his sons were not.
Mm-hmm.
So that I had to say to the sons, me being the dying and death expert and everything, well, what would you like your dad to do? How would you like your dad to respond to this? What are your worries about your dad? What are your, etc. And turn the thing around so that the discussion could happen.
Right. So it's multi-way. No, that's good. We do have another question. This is from Andrea Cook. Do you recommend any resources for people who honor the wishes of the dying and then have to cope with the choices they made for their loved ones? So this gets back to what you were saying about those who are left behind.
I might recommend searching for a forum. I know that there's a website called Virtual Hospice where they do have not post, but they have examples of situations like that. But I think it is really important to wrap one's head around that, to honoring the wishes, that those wishes goes back to being shared. If you're having a hard time, like me, coping with my sister's decision not to have medical assistance in dying, that's my problem.
Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely, like, whose death is it anyway? Doesn't mean it makes it any simpler. It doesn't mean it makes the conversations any less emotional, but it does help to explore why. So there's a great film out there, short film called Extremis, that was produced by a doctor named Jessica Zitter, which is not on my list of resources. But she goes into an emergency, an ER, and talks to 2 or 3 of the caregivers, the kids of people who are dying. And, you know, one of them says, I know my mom is brain dead, but I can't bear to remove her life support because it's like murdering her. And she had to have several conversations about what is murder, what is not.
Mhm.
What are you worried? How do you think your mother's coping with? Is it different than you? Take your time to say goodbye. So there are many reasons why we don't want people to leave. And I think the best is the decision of least regret.
Mhm.
And sometimes there is no one right decision. There is no one right decision. And I think that is important to impart too for any residual guilt or regret. Yeah. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for that one.
That's a hard one. That's a really hard one. We have one other question. So what's the responsibility, as you see it, of healthcare professionals to ask and start these conversations in the context of a patient's journey? It's yeah, so like there's a family and there's the healthcare provider. So what do you suggest?
Well, I would humbly submit that it is every healthcare professional's opportunity to address this. As far as the responsibility goes, I think that is the purview of the schools or the medical societies or whatever. But um, I know that it's awkward and complicated, so that healthcare professionals, should be encouraged, but they also need training. They also need some support. And yeah, your patient is dying and you don't want to talk about it either, but you're their mate, etc. So I don't know if I can answer whose responsibility it is. I think it's probably in this world of shared decision making, it can be our responsibility too to say to our doctor, can we talk about my health? I want to know where my health is now.
Mhm.
Or Jill, you need to talk to them.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, okay, how are we doing? All right. Well, I think we have a few minutes left. I want to take a minute at the end to thank people, but Kathy, if you have any final words or one final story
Thing?
or thought,
Well,
and
the thing on my Instagram account, My Best Endings, I've been collecting good death stories. Just what is
Mhm.
a good death? I think it's different
Mhm.
for everyone. So one of them is about a guy who had whatever he had that he could not eat or drink. And so every time some saliva, he could take teeny sips of something and then his stomach would reject it all. But his doctor knew he was dying. Palliative doctor knew it. His nurse knew that he was dying. So when he said, what I really want is an orange. I want to eat an orange. The doctor went out and got 3 or 4 Valencia juicy oranges. They all knew this was going to hasten his death, and it might not be a pretty death, but this is what he wanted. And he bit into the orange right through the skin, and the juice was running down his face, and he was smiling his guts out. And he considered, and his wife considered, that a good death. Now, the doctors might not have. Witnessing this, they might have thought, why would you do that to yourself? But that constituted a good death for him. And the other story I have is from a German woman I met who said, my mother had a very good death. She said, actually, she had cancer, so she was dying for a long time. And during that time, my sister divorced her husband, who was very close to my mother. I don't know how my father stood it. She was with the ex-son-in-law all the time. But then she was dying. My father was in the hospital and he had his arm around her neck to give her comfort. And my ex-brother-in-law came in and my father said, can you take my place because my arm is getting tired. And my brother-in-law put his arm around my mother's neck and she looked up at him and her face got all glowy and she smiled and she died. It was a good death. So who knows? I don't think my sister, who in the end approved palliative sedation. That was her. And she couldn't even say those words. She and her son had a code word for it. It's called Angelo's technique, because their friend, Dr. Angelo, had said every now and again, I give someone a little extra. So to be sensitive, to be tuned in is a big deal. So thank you for all of that. And I'll just tell you that my husband said to me that if I died before him, he's never talking to me again.
Oh, that's great. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Like I said, nobody but you could make this topic as light and memorable as you do. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody else for joining us here too. Stay tuned. Take a look at what our next webinar is going to be, and remember, you can get the slides and the recording on the webinar page of the Health Literacy Solutions Center. It should be there probably by next week or so. So thank you all, and thank you, Kathy, for a great presentation.
Thank you all for letting me mouth off. So much fun. Okay.
Bye.